The room held its breath before the microphones even sparked alive, red lights blinking like warning signals in the thickened silence. The forum in Accra was supposed to be another polished gathering, the kind where speeches blended into policy. Documents and polite applause filled the gaps. But the air already felt different, heavy, almost charged, as though the walls themselves sensed the weight of what was about to unfold. Hillary Clinton stepped into the hall with her practiced poise, the careful smile of someone long accustomed to global stages. Every step carried an invisible echo of power accumulated over decades, of negotiations struck behind closed doors, of the kind of influence that bent governments. Cameras leaned toward her, eager to capture her presence. Yet across the stage, Ibrahim Traore stood still, his hands folded loosely in front of him, eyes unwavering. His calm posture did not contest her entrance, nor did it bend in deference. It simply held, like a rooted tree before a passing storm. The moderator's voice shook as he greeted the room, his words stumbling slightly, as though afraid of the weight they carried. Outside, sirens cut through the city, but inside the silence pressed tighter, broken only by the small cry of a child in the balcony before fading again. Phones lit up across the audience. Streams had already gone live. Far from the hall, in a cramped home with peeling paint and a humming fan, a young nursing student named Awa balanced her cracked tablet on her lap. Her mother leaned beside her, scarf edges worn soft from years of use, while her little brother swung his feet against a plastic chair. They were not officials or policymakers. They were ordinary lives tuning in, waiting to see if words spoken today might touch their own quiet struggles. Awa thought of her father's hands, cracked from farming millet, and silently wished this week would bring ease to them. When the moderator announced opening remarks, Hillary rose first. Her voice was measured, steady, polished in the way only years of public service could produce. She spoke of frameworks, of regional partnerships, of risks carefully weighed against strategies. Her words had rhythm, precise and diplomatic, filled with the language of reports and oversight. She smiled when she said the word trust, her tone almost soothing, as though her speech itself was a balm for instability. In the audience, some nodded, their pens scratching dutifully across notebooks. Online, comments rolled in, some praising her clarity, others mocking the emptiness of words so far removed from dust roads and hungry children. Ibrahim listened without movement. He did not fidget or interrupt. He waited, the stillness around him louder than her steady cadence. When at last her speech slowed, he leaned slightly toward the microphone. His voice was low, warm and unhurried, carrying not the sharpness of rebuttal, but the weight of lived reality. "Madam," he began softly, "we welcome help. But help must not come with strings that choke." He paused, letting the silence bend around his words. "Listen, please, to simple things." He did not counter her statistics with new statistics, nor her frameworks with alternate frameworks. Instead, he raised pictures in the minds of the audience. A reopened schoolyard in Kaya where children once ran in fear. A market in Fada alive again at noon, doors no longer shuttered. A repaired water point in a village where girls had once walked for hours in heat and dust. The narration lingered on each image, turning them from lines of testimony into cinematic scenes unfolding across the hall. Awa at home felt her chest tighten. She could almost see the children laughing with chalk-stained fingers, the mothers bending at the pump with relief in their eyes. Online, the comments slowed. Words that had earlier streamed like rain now hesitated, as though the truth carried in his voice required space to settle. Reporters shifted in their seats, their pens suddenly pausing. He listed facts in a rhythm different from Hillary's, not rehearsed, but rooted in earth and sweat. Fewer blocked roads this month, grain convoys arriving on time, young volunteers, standing guard at wells with whistles and radios in hand. "These are not models," he said quietly, his eyes steady. "They are mothers and sons." The words fell heavy, not like accusations, but like truths that demanded acknowledgement. A faint murmur stirred in the room, as if the collective breath had changed direction. Hillary's papers, perfectly aligned moments earlier, seemed suddenly too crisp, too far from the dust of the villages he described. The silence that followed was not empty, but charged, as though everyone sensed a shift in the balance of power. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing his face, his calmness, the weight behind each word. Awa's mother touched the corner of her scarf, smoothing it with trembling fingers, her eyes wet. Online, someone typed simply, "Truth is heavy." And then, in one small, deliberate gesture, Ibrahim reached into his coat and placed a worn brown notebook on the table before him. Its edges were frayed, the cover soft from years of use. He set it down gently, without flourish, yet its presence felt louder than Hillary's carefully stacked notes. The hall leaned in, breathless, as though that small book carried more than words. It carried lives. The introduction closed there, suspended in silence, every eye fixed on the unassuming notebook that now threatened to upend the polished weight of Western power. The brown notebook rested between them like an unspoken challenge, its worn edges hinting at truths written in dust and sweat rather than polished reports. The moderator shifted in his chair, clearing his throat, unsure whether to lean toward the practiced power of Clinton's notes or the quiet authority of Ibrahim's. The silence cracked when Hillary tilted her chin, her voice smooth, practiced. "We need systems, Mr. President. Without verifiable frameworks, without oversight, without structure, stories risk becoming fragile, unsustainable." Her words moved like polished marble, heavy but cold. Ibrahim did not flinch. He simply tapped the notebook once with his finger. "These are not stories. They are records, lives. Do you want to hear them?" The narration pulled backward then, into flashbacks woven between his words. U.S. aid programs. Promised new clinics, yet villages watched as contracts shifted to companies tied to foreign donors. Supplies diverted, clinics unfinished. A truck of grain meant for a hungry province diverted to the black market, while officials in air-conditioned offices signed papers declaring success. Complaints written by village leaders dismissed as administratively incomplete. Ibrahim had walked through those unfinished walls, had bent to pick up unused bags of cement hardened by rain. He had listened as mothers described children dying beneath banners that promised aid. Each memory stood in sharp contrast to the living facts now folded into his notebook. From the balcony, a tremulous voice rose. A young man stood, his shirt neat but frayed at the collar. His words cracked as he spoke. "Last year my father was killed on the road. We buried him without a coffin. Today my brother walks that same road safely to school. That is what has changed." The hall froze. Cameras swung toward him, reporters scrambling. Hillary turned her head slowly, her expression unreadable, as though searching for a way to catalogue grief into a policy line. Ibrahim only bowed his head toward the young man, saying softly, "This is the true record. It is not my success. It is their endurance." The weight of that acknowledgement settled over the hall, yet Hillary's voice returned, calm but sharpened. "How do we verify? Passion without accountability fades." It was a diplomat's blade, honed by years of practice. Ibrahim leaned forward. "Then call them," he said. The room stirred. He gestured toward the technician's table. "Numbers are written here. Names, voices. Let us not debate them. Let us listen to them." Murmurs rippled. The moderator hesitated, then nodded. A phone was plugged into the sound system, its dial, tone filling the hall like a drumbeat. The first call rang out, a nervous hush pressing over the crowd. A woman answered, breathless. "This is Mariam from Kaya." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "The clinic generator works now. We take turns keeping watch at night. The babies cry less." The hall remained frozen, listening to the fragile strength of her words. Another call followed, a teacher in Fada describing chalk delivered in sacks tied with blue rope. "Children come early. We are still afraid sometimes, but the road is no longer blocked." His voice cracked, but his relief was undeniable. The narration painted their voices as vivid as moving images. Children pressing stones into boards to write lessons, mothers gathering under the dim glow of a fixed lamp at a clinic gate, men carrying sacks of grain without fear of ambush. Every testimony chipped away at the marble of Clinton's frameworks, exposing the cracks beneath. Hillary leaned closer, her pen still but her lips tight. She thanked the voices politely, yet her tone carried strain as though her grip on control was slipping. Online, the flood grew relentless. Hashtags lit across timelines, broken roads open, truth from villages, notebook not policy. Clips spread of Ibrahim quietly holding the phone, Hillary's composed face hardening beside him. Reporters whispered among themselves, one jotting in the margin of her notebook, "This is not debate, this is mirror." The world was not watching an exchange. It was witnessing power tilt in real time. Still, Hillary pressed forward, her words firmer now. "Without oversight, noble intentions can collapse. Data protects against failure. Where is your sustainability?" Her challenge landed heavy, but Ibrahim's calm did not waver. He folded the notebook closed with deliberate care, his voice soft, yet sharp enough to cut through the hall. Sustainability is not written in offices, it is lived in villages. The silence that followed was not defeat, but recognition, as though even the walls knew which truth weighed more. The final day arrived with a storm hanging low over the city, clouds swollen like unspoken words. By dawn, crowds had pressed into the hall, filling every seat, spilling into aisles and corridors. Even those who could not enter lingered outside, listening through open windows and phone streams, their faces tense with expectation. Inside, cameras blinked steadily, their red lights multiplying like restless eyes. The air was tight, anticipation settling like a weight across every shoulder. Hillary sat at her table, her papers, once perfectly stacked, now slightly bent at the edges, the polish of earlier days dulled. Her voice, when she began, carried traces of fatigue, still sharp, but no longer commanding in the way it had before. "Mr. President," she said, measured and clear, "you have moved hearts with passion. But passion is not enough. Without structure, without accountability, noble dreams collapse into dust." She paused, looking out over the crowd as if to draw strength, then added, "The world cannot build on hope alone." Some nodded. Others watched in silence, waiting. Ibrahim rose slowly. He did not shuffle his papers or adjust his jacket. He simply stood, his presence filling the room in a way that words could not measure. His gaze swept over the hall, lingering on the balcony, where the young man who had spoken days before now sat clutching his knees. When he spoke, his voice carried low but steady, rising like a tide that refused to be turned back. "Fear," he said, each syllable deliberate, "is the heaviest tax, and our children have paid it long enough." The line cut through the hall like glass breaking, sharp and undeniable. Pens froze mid-stroke. A reporter lowered her camera, blinking hard against the tears that came uninvited. Hillary's smile, faintly poised moments earlier, slipped. Her pen, which she had lifted almost reflexively to note a rebuttal, lowered back to the paper without a mark. The narration unfolded around her faltering composure. The polished edges of her career, the carefully trained cadence of her voice, all seemed brittle now against the raw humanity laid bare in Ibrahim's words. The weight of decades of policy talk clashed with the simple truth of fear lived daily. The hall seemed to lean toward him as though hungry for more. He did not rush. He allowed silence to breathe, then lifted his hand slightly, inviting, not commanding. From the side aisle, a girl no older than 10 walked forward with her mother beside her. Security hesitated, but Ibrahim nodded gently, and the hall parted for her. She carried a folded piece of paper, edges crumpled from her grip. She handed it to him shyly. He unfolded it slowly, revealing a child's drawing, a stick-figure family smiling beneath a roof, a tree beside them, and a sun blazing bright in the corner. Gasps rippled across the audience. Ibrahim knelt, lowering himself so his eyes met hers. "Who drew this?" he asked softly. "Me," she whispered. "It's my family. We used to run when the roads were bad. Now I can draw us at home." Her words quivered, but their truth was unshakable. Ibrahim raised the drawing for all to see. His voice cracked slightly, not with weakness but with unfiltered weight. "This," he said, "is the true report. No statistic is stronger than a child's dream." The hall trembled with emotion. Reporters stopped writing. Some covered their mouths. Hillary turned her gaze downward, her shoulders taut as though trying to hold against the flood. Yet the moment was not finished. From the crowd, a boy stepped forward, his sandals broken, the sole flapping with each step. He held it up, voice trembling but steady. "President, this is what I wear to school. I don't need charity. I just want a road safe enough to walk on." The room hushed so deeply that the faint hum of the lights seemed deafening. Ibrahim bent and touched the worn sandal gently, his voice low. "Your shoe tells the story better than I ever could. I promise you our children will not walk in fear." Cameras flashed, but the image etched itself deeper than any lens could capture. The narration painted the contrast in stark lines. Hillary sitting rigid, her jaw tight, her words slipping further from relevance, while Ibrahim stood with the people, bending not to power but to truth. Old power unraveled silently under the weight of testimonies no report could erase. Online, streams exploded, hashtags multiplied, clips of the girl's drawing and the boy's sandal spreading like fire. But in the hall, noise was replaced by something heavier. Silence that felt sacred. A collective awareness that this was no longer a forum, but a reckoning. Still, Hillary tried one last time, her voice even, though thinner now. "You speak beautifully, Mr. President, but beauty is not a plan." The hall leaned back toward Ibrahim, waiting. He did not hesitate. His eyes steady, his tone calm, he answered, "My arguments are lives, children, farmers, mothers, which weighs more?" The words fell like a gavel, final and unanswerable. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the hall. Then, like a dam breaking, applause erupted. Not polite, not staged. It came in waves, raw and unstoppable, as people stood, clapped, wept openly. Hillary lowered her eyes, her pen lying still against paper that now seemed useless. And in that flood of sound, her humiliation was sealed. Not by insult, not by force, but by the undeniable power of truth spoken with dignity. The applause that had shaken the hall did not echo forever, but its weight lingered in the air long after the last claps faded. When the forum closed, cameras swarmed the exits, reporters fighting to frame the story as politics, as strategy, as power games. Yet what had unfolded could not be reduced to columns of data or diplomatic sound bites. It followed Hillary as she left the stage, her smile stiff, her steps heavier than when she had first entered. In her hotel suite that night, she sat alone with her laptop, scrolling through feeds that once celebrated her authority, but now replayed a different story. Every clip carried the same sting. A small brown notebook set gently on a table. A girl's drawing lifted high in fragile hands, a broken sandal held up by a boy who asked only for a safe road. She watched her own face on the screen, framed beside Ibrahim's, her composure dimmed by the rawness of truth she could not match. She clicked pause, but the image remained burned into her reflection, a woman of power overshadowed by a man who had needed none. Outside her circle of influence, silence spread among her sponsors, her allies, those who once leaned on her certainty. Their statements grew cautious, their endorsements delayed. A week was all it had taken. 7 days of facts spoken with dignity to dull an aura that had seemed unbreakable. She tried to call advisors, but messages returned slow, voices hesitant, unwilling to confront the fracture that had opened. In the quiet of her room, her phone buzzed with reminders of interviews requested, yet she declined them all. For the first time in years, she had no words ready, no shield of policy strong enough to cover the wound of exposure. Far from the polished halls, Ibrahim walked not through conferences, but among his people. He stepped over uneven roads, greeted farmers carrying sacks of grain, listened to mothers guarding clinics with lanterns in their hands. He did not hold victory rallies or stand on podiums. He walked slowly, quietly, shaking hands, letting children surround him with laughter as if the weak storm had passed into calm. Cameras that tried to follow him found no staged moment, only dust roads filled with life, returning in small but undeniable ways. His words from the hall echoed faintly. Behind him, respect, not pity, partnership, not puppets, but he did not repeat them. The echo was enough. In a dim room lit by a clicking fan, Awa clutched her cracked tablet, her face wet with tears she no longer tried to hide. She had watched every session, every word, her heart swelling with both grief and pride. She whispered prayers for her father's hands, rough with lines like dry rivers, hoping they might one day rest from their endless work. Her brother, sitting cross-legged beside her, hummed the folk song that had filled the streets outside the forum, his voice thin but sure. For them, the internet was not a place of noise but a window of belonging, where millions across continents had felt the same tremor of truth. Clips continued to flood across platforms. A child's drawing became an icon, reposted with captions that read, "This is the true report." The image of a sandal with its torn sole circulated beside the hashtag, "Broken Roads Open." Yet beneath the frenzy, the lasting impact settled quietly. A school that did not close at noon, a market where doors remained open, a clinic where babies cried less because the light stayed on through the night. These changes did not trend, but they held. The internet roared and moved on, as it always does, but villages did not forget. For Hillary, the collapse was not a scandal splashed across headlines, but an erosion inside, the quiet unraveling of certainty. Each night she replayed the clip of Ibrahim holding the drawing aloft. She tried to frame it as theater, as performance, but the truth resisted. What unsettled her most was not his words alone, but the reflection she saw in her screen, a face that looked older, heavier, smaller than she remembered. The strength she once wielded seemed to belong to another era, one that had just ended in a hall far from Washington. Meanwhile, Ibrahim's words did not fade. Respect, not pity. Partnership, not puppets. They were repeated in classrooms, whispered in markets, quoted in newspapers not as slogans but as reminders. They carried weight because they had been spoken without anger, without demand, only with dignity. They became a rhythm to which villages rebuilt, a phrase translated into action where papers could not reach. The story's last image did not belong to either leader, but to the child who returned with her mother days later, holding a small candle lit despite the sun above. She handed it to Ibrahim shyly, whispering, "Even when it is day, we need someone to keep the flame alive." He knelt once more, smiling softly, and gave it back. The flame is already in you. Keep it burning. The camera caught the moment, but the real fire lived beyond the lens. Across homes like ours, across markets and schools, that small flame passed quietly, held by people who had no titles but carried history in their hands.